Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Duenas, an adapted physical education specialist for Irvine Unified School District. And today I'll be sharing with you accommodations and modifications for everyone in physical education. Our agenda and outcomes for today. I will be explaining to you the role of an adapted PE teacher in PE and how we support in various ways. Who needs accommodations and modifications in PE? The differences between accommodations and modifications, ideas, teaching strategies, and additional student support. Adapted versus adaptive. This is a word that gets commonly misused and exchanged in PE. So to clarify, according to the adapted PE guidelines in California schools, adapted is to meet the need of each student through modifications and accommodations, meaning that we are changing the environment for the student to be safe and successful within the PE environment. Adaptive would be that the student is required to adapt to the conditions of the program. We always want to try to be an adapted PE program. The adapted PE teacher's role in PE. We can provide a various range of services when we're in the PE setting. We can do a direct, which means we're pushing in, or a collaboration. And this is where the APE teacher and the general ed PE teacher work together to create a safe and meaningful lesson for all the students in the class. So we are working together side by side, creating lesson plans. We're both making accommodations, we're both modifying whatever the given lesson is, and we're also interchanging between our students and working with both special ed and general ed together. A more restrictive service would be a direct service, and this would be a pull-out session. And this is where the APE teacher is working with students with special needs who have adapted PE services in a small group setting, and this is typically not something you're going to see in the gen ed PE setting. This is going to be off to the side or even in a separate location from the regular PE setting. A consultation service is also something that an adapted PE teacher can offer, and this is more of the adapted PE teacher talking to the general ed PE teacher, the classroom teacher, any sort of support staff, and this is for us to give accommodation, sometimes modification ideas for the teacher's lessons. We might also be giving some strategies to produce more student involvement, also to help maybe reduce a student's behaviors. But this is really when we are working with the adults. We aren't doing too much work with the student at this point. The student is safe and successful to a certain degree in PE, and so it's really just us checking in with their teacher of record and supporting the teacher and giving them ideas. So who needs accommodations and modifications? Well, everyone does. Just because a student has special needs doesn't necessarily mean that they need any accommodations or modifications to their PE curriculum. And that goes for a child who doesn't have special needs. We have a melting pot in our district, and we are constantly getting students from out of the country who've never been exposed to traditional PE sports, and they haven't even been exposed to a traditional PE class. So we are actually implementing a lot of modified games, especially in that earlier PE setting, but we're constantly trying to give accommodations to our students, whether it's a visual or a visual paired with the demonstration, or cueing cards, anything to help a a child who learns beyond just auditory with a quick visual demonstration. We want to be able to meet a child's various ways of learning, and that is through accommodations and sometimes modifications. So what are accommodations? These are changes made in order for a student to achieve the same outcome as his or her peers. So really nothing is being changed if you were just looking at the activity. It's going to be the same activity, but there might be a slight bit of support, and we will get into that in just a minute. So here are some basic PE accommodations. Shorter distances. So for example, with running, maybe doing 1 lap instead of 2, or making shuttle runs, or some sort of partner running. So there isn't necessarily a child always coming in first or a child always coming in last. I like to do running activities that aren't highlighting anyone faster or slower. It's always nice to do things where everyone's coming in together, or people aren't being highlighted as either the fastest or the slowest. Sometimes when we just say do a lap around the field, it's very obvious who our slower runners are, and it's very obvious who our faster runners are. So something like an interval run instead is going to help to not only take away that fear of being the slowest, but it's also going to give really good pacing for runners as well. So I like to do accommodations like that. We're still getting our cardio in, we're still getting our daily laps in, but we're doing it in a way that isn't as highlighting as a traditional way. Visual supports is one of my favorite accommodations. I feel like this could be used for any activity. When we think about a classroom, we think about all the various learning tools that are given inside that classroom, but also meeting all the different kinds of learners' needs. Obviously, when the teacher is talking, we're giving that verbal, auditory learners' needs, but then when you're in the classroom, there's so many visual supports. And so that visual learner has those supports constantly in the classroom. However, when we go out to PE, we lose those visual supports so quickly, and those children that are visual learners, that completely goes out the window for them, and they do tend to struggle with just that auditory instruction. So having something like numbered bases, or even some written or picture instructions, just so the child's able to check in again with what the directions, even though the directions were already given, having that visual cue for them is such a great way to help them check in. It helps them remember the order of sequence in which a skill should be done. And it helps them to remember form as well if you're doing a specific skill instruction. I also like to use chalk and directional lines for either spacing or for standing in a certain area to practice skills. Any sort of reminder to how a skill should be done, especially for our elementary kiddos. This is so helpful, and chalk is so easy to get out there, mark up some markings, and it really helps with our visual learners. And then another accommodation, just more time to practice skills, reducing that wait time. So really trying to offer more stations, less large group, or smaller group practice versus those large games. I always think about those big soccer fields, and we have little first graders on there, and they're running back and forth, and they're all playing the same game together. I personally rather see that big soccer field broken up into 6 mini fields, and then we're taking all of those first graders and putting them into smaller groups so we could actually see some skill progression and gameplay going on. There's going to be a lot more movement, and there's going to be a lot more skill practicing being shown in situations like that. So here are some visuals of accommodation ideas. So like I said, I love chalk lines. I think they're a great way to show skill, to do skill practice. So this one right here, for example, would be stepping and throwing with opposition. So we're reminding the child to step and throw. The line is which they would step over, and the X is their 2 feet. So the X's would be their starting feet. We need to step over the line and throw. The zigzags and swervy lines, these would be directional lines for locomotor skills. The circles, we're leaping over the pond. So that's a good way for a child to remember for a leap, they're doing a long stride. It's also great to even have out some informational cards about what you're trying to teach. So this one, for example, is crab walk, and it has a picture of a child doing a crab walk and what your body position should be. Side to side, this is a really good one to practice jump rope skills. So it's one child, this is their jump rope on the floor, and then they're taking both feet and they're jumping side to side as fast as they can over the line. This is a really great way to practice jump rope skills without a jump rope and to get the 2-foot coordination going before we actually add the rope. Some more accommodation ideas. This is one of my favorite ones for pacing. So remember, we walk when it's yellow. When we see green, we run, and we don't stop until we see our yellow again. So it's a really good way for kids to remember, I have to run all the way until I see my walk sign. And it motivates them to get there, and it's the easy way for them to remember, oh yeah, I got to keep running until I see my walk sign. Fitness stations, it's always nice to have a picture, especially if you're going to do a big station circuit where you have 12 different things. The kid's going to forget by the 3rd station what they were supposed to do. So it's always nice to have a reminder of what that station was supposed to be, how long, as you can see on the little timer right here, how long you want them to be doing that activity for. And then they would transition to the next station. Again, another picture with the amount of time you want them to be practicing. So always, those visuals are my favorite accommodations. So moving on to modifications. So this is adjusting the standard level of performance, allowing the student to continue to participate with their peers. But there are things that are going to be changed up in modifications. Modifications are different than accommodations because now we're actually changing that traditional practice or that original game plan that you had for an activity. So this can be done in various ways. It can be done through skill development. So you might be offering various levels for one skill. So for example, if we're talking about a warm-up and we're talking about jumping jacks, we might have some kids only doing lower body jumping jacks while the rest of the kids are doing the coordinated upper and lower body. We might have, for fitness, some students doing maybe a modified high body plank versus doing a full range motion push-up. For object control, we might see a student using a larger size implement rather than a like the small size birdie. So that could be changing up skills. And then also, like I said, going into equipment. This could be actually changing the actual equipment, using textured equipment, foam, nerf, changing the weight of an implement, or changing the size of the equipment. So some modification ideas. A lot of these are going to be equipment pieces. So these are some of my favorite modified pieces of equipment. So if we're doing jump rope, this would be a single rope jump rope skill, and what you're trying to do is to get the wiffle balls to turn at the same pace. So we're working on the timing. Although the child is not physically jumping a single turn jump rope, they're working on their timing. The long fiberglass rope right here, this also helps for long rope jumping and timing. All 3 of the balls up here are just different size, textured balls to help with catching, throwing, bumping, I prefer both of these two balls, the soft volleyball and the large bump ball, for any sort of catching, throwing, bumping skill practice, just because they're so soft on impact. And I'm not a fan of having a really hard leather ball thrown at me. And I don't know too many children that do. So having something that's more friendly to catch, friendly to hit, friendly to throw, kids are going to be more open to showing you better skills because that fear is out of the way of actually getting hit with the ball. They can actually focus on the skill. And that's a big reason why modified equipment is always a better route to go when you are teaching a new skill, because then the child can really just focus on the skill versus having for example, a volleyball and they're working on bumping. It does hurt when you're first learning how to bump a volleyball, especially if you're not doing it right. And after a while, you're just going to be knocking the ball versus actually trying to bump appropriately. So when you're using softer textured balls or balls that are easier on contact, the kids can actually focus on the skill. I always like to think of skill practice as I want them to learn the skill. Do I care what kind of equipment they're using while they're learning it? Absolutely not. We're not we're not in a tournament. This isn't for competition. We are here to learn. For me, any sort of equipment could work as long as we're learning the right mechanics to a skill. I also like using foam equipment for my smaller kiddos. Foam is just friendly anyways, and how many times do we have to yell and scream about keeping a stick down, or we don't want anything to hit anyone? This is just a really great way to keep everyone safe anyways if it's foam. I also like to use, although we're not going to see too many dumbbells or weightlifting happening at our elementary middle school level, when we are introducing fitness skills, I still like to try to incorporate fit sticks or any sort of easy grip weight. I also like resistance bands just over our traditional weights. And then this is the Accommodation and Modification resource guide that I've created. It's just a nice, easy way to look at a specific skill that you might see in PE and what's a quick accommodation, modification, and a teaching strategy that would go along with that. It's just a nice reference guide if you feel like you're someone who doesn't think about accommodations and modifications quickly on the fly. This would be a really good resource to use and just have it available to you. So if you're ever in the middle of a lesson and you're like, oh man, I need something quick, I feel like this is a good way to just quickly reference something. So I've highlighted one area of each of the activities that you would see in PE. I'm not going to go over all these because there are so many, but I did want to highlight at least one from each section to give you guys an idea. So for example, jumping jacks, a modification for that would be slowing down the pace to 10 regular jumping jacks versus 20 fast ones with really bad form. So just slowing down the skill and then using that verbal cue, rocket body and star body. So show me your rocket, show me your stars. This is a good way to have a child visualize what a rocket would look like and what a star would look like, and having them demonstrate that same, imitate that same body movement. So for catching skills, always reducing the distance. That's a great accommodation, especially for our little bodied children. We don't need them too far away. We rather have them close so they're demonstrating the skill appropriately. Also, always trying to use Nerf, lightweight, softer equipment such as a beach ball or a foam disc frisbee. I also, when it is available and appropriate, have an adult step in for a teaching strategy and ensure that the student knows how to demonstrate the catching skill before giving them to a novice thrower and they're just flinging the balls or flinging the frisbees everywhere. Actually have an adult step in and make sure that the kid knows how to actually do the skill before letting them off and practicing on their own. And this does take a little bit of time to do, but it ensures that you know that the child knows how to do the skill versus them teasing out, is it a behavior? Are they messing around? Or do they really not know how to catch this ball? So it's a good way to do a quick evaluation on your students' performance criteria as well. So for kicking skills, I like to use, especially if I'm doing trapping passing skills or any sort of dribbling skills, I do like to have a deflated soccer ball for a slower roll and better control. I think that's a great way to keep the ball on the ground, and then the kids aren't kick running. They actually are able to keep better control of the ball. And then when available, creating targets, not necessarily kicking to a partner right away, but having targets of either stacked up cones or buckets or any sort of object that a child could kick into. It's definitely going to help with their kicking accuracy. Striking skills. This is one of my favorite accommodations. Just lower or no nets at all, especially when we're practicing skills. I'm 4'11", so for me, a regulation size volleyball net is not my favorite way to play volleyball. I prefer no net at all. But if I do have to have a net, a lower net's preferred because I definitely have more success with it. And I know that younger children feel the same exact way about that, especially when you're just practicing the skill or learning it for the first time. It feels good when that ball goes over. But as a teacher, it feels even better when you see the children striking appropriately and making that appropriate contact and getting it over the net. So when you can, lower those nets, or like I said, no nets at all. Lightweight equipment for striking, balloons, and beach balls. Those are my favorite. I know balloons if you need to be inside, but beach balls are my favorite type of striking ball. Oversized volleyballs are super fun as well as oversized birdies for badminton. Those regulation size birdies are just so tiny, and they actually are really difficult to track through the air. So having a really big, colorful birdie out there, those jumbo ones, not only are they so fun, but you're going to get so much more contact and a better rally from your students. And then for game situations, groups and teams based on students' needs. This is a very easy accommodation. It does take a little bit of time to do, but so much more success with your students' performance when you pre-group and you choose the teams rather than having the students do it. When you are modifying rules, it's very important that we're not singling out children with disabilities or having them do a very separate game compared to what everyone else is doing. That day, let's have everyone try a modified game. That's the best way to go about modified rules and modified games. Some of those rules can be everyone on the team has to touch the ball before scoring. Each person can only score twice during one game. When serving, allow for students to serve from where they feel comfortable. Also, some teaching strategies for game situations. Provide a variety of choices. It's okay to have a level 3, 2, 1, and level 3 is the most competitive, where level 1 there's no competition at all, and then letting the kids go to those areas and then deciding how hard of a game they want to play. Not keeping score is also another one of my favorites. I don't feel like we need to. I know some kids, it's very important that they have a score, but if we just set out that day and say we're not keeping score, they're typically okay with it. No elimination games. And also smaller groupings. I talked about this earlier with soccer games. break up those fields, do half courts. Anytime we can have smaller game practice going on, that means more movement for our kids. More movement, more practice, better skill progression, better skill development. Some physical fitness testing accommodations. So students with disabilities may need extra accommodations to be successful during physical fitness testing. And here are some of those examples of what you can do to practice physical fitness testing with accommodations in your lessons. So you can do the pacer instead of doing the mile. That's always a good accommodation for all of our students. We can also have visual demonstrations and video modeling for push-ups and curl-ups. And then we can also do the visual modeling and visual demonstrations for the trunk lift, shoulder stretch, and the sit and reach. So these are all areas in which you can continue to provide those visual demonstrations so the child has something to look back on. Something I wanted to add in here, just a reminder to all of our educators out there, top 10 ways to support students with special needs in PE. Understanding the student's disability. I think this is a great one. We can definitely meet their needs a lot more if we understand what their classroom accommodations and modifications are. If we know that we have a visual learner and we're not providing any visual supports out in our PE setting, of course that child's going to struggle in PE. But maybe just throwing out some visual supports, not only is it going to help that student, but it's going to help other students in the class as well. Be in communication with your students' ed specialist or instructional aides. Anytime you can collaborate, communicate, consult with the classroom teacher, or if they have a one-on-one or any sort of support staff that works with the child, it's always going to help you learn your student better so you can support them in PE. Scaffolding the games and activities with various skill levels. This is something that we talked about already. Be mindful when pairing and grouping students. And like I said, that does take a little bit of time, but it's definitely going to help to produce a more active, engaged student out there in PE. Varying your equipment, varying the learning environment. Promote movement and learning versus competitive play. So like I said, offering those various levels and letting the child decide which level they want to practice in that day or play in that day. Giving instructional aides specific directions on what their students should be doing during their activity. So if a child does have a one-on-one, utilize them. Make sure that they're working as well, and giving them an assignment to make sure that they're staying on top of the child that they're assigned to. Number 8, focus, emphasize, and build upon your students' strengths rather than their challenges. I think in general, this is just always just good practice to see where any of your children shine and help them to continue shining in that area. It always is better to, at least I feel like it's always better to promote those in a positive way versus always highlighting those negatives. But yet at the same time, being constructive, giving constructive feedback and challenging children is always wonderful. But of course, with that positive feedback and giving, like I said, building upon their strengths always. Number 9, be a contributing member when participating in your students' IEPs. So this kind of goes back to number 8, especially when you're in that IEP. I know it could be a very intimidating environment, especially if you're not used to going to IEPs. But if you could go in and share one area of PE that they are doing an amazing job and one area that you would like to see improve, that goes a long way for a parent with a child who has special needs. So many times in those IEPs, it can be really negative. So when you're going in and sharing strengths and highlighting areas in which they might not even see their child demonstrate these skills at home, it feels really, really good to hear. So always try to go in. Like I said, I always appreciate when my PE teachers are coming into my meetings and they're sharing that strength, and again, an area that they would like to see a child work on, but always starting with that strength. And then number 10, don't underestimate a student's ability because they have a disability. My students amaze me every single day. I am always impressed with how hard they push themselves and how they continue to learn and grow. And it's because I set that challenge for them and they rise to the occasion. And it's pretty amazing. And I feel like with accommodations and modifications in place, it's because they feel confident and they want to keep growing and learning because of that. Those accommodations and modifications are so important, and it helps them feel really good about their gross motor skills. So you have done all of the accommodations, you have done all the modifications, and you're still having that child in PE struggling. Who do I contact? What do I do? You can contact your school psychologist. You can also talk to your students' educational specialist, which is their special ed teacher, to find out what kind of modifications and accommodations that they're using in the IEP or in the classroom, and try to implement their personalized ones. And if those continue to not work and the child is still failing and they're still not doing good, you can always contact your school's APE teacher. If your school doesn't have an APE teacher, you can contact the district's APE lead, and then they should be able to help direct you to someone to give you some more support that way, with possibly an observation or further steps that may be needed. But don't feel alone out there. Don't feel like these are the only accommodations and modifications out there. This is a teeny tiny snapshot of the options that you can use. There is a lot out there. There's a lot of support and resources. And with that being said, I am here to support you virtually. You can always reach out to me if you ever have a specific concern, or you want a specific accommodation or modification idea for your students. You can contact me and we can set up something and get you the support you need. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope that I will be seeing you soon in person at the next elementary PE workshop in 2021. But if not, this was a fun new challenge for me. I've never presented virtually before, and it was different, but it was a good challenge, and I'm happy I was able to share my information with you guys this way. Have a great day, and thank you very much.
Thank you for watching this session from EPEW 2020. We're saving the next few minutes for you to ask those final questions before we log off. If you have any questions afterwards, please reach out to the presenter or send a message to EPEW through our website.
Don't forget that we have more amazing sessions going on. Head over to our website, epew-cp.weebly.com, and look for the virtual EPEW 2020 tab.
You can also access the presentations on YouTube by typing in the hashtag EPEW 2020.
We'd like to thank the amazing EPEW committee for all their hard work over this past year. This event would not have been possible without their dedication, commitment, and volunteering their time to providing high-quality professional development.
Don't forget about our other events like our socials and share times. Links can be found on our website.
Remember our motto for EPEW, come to learn, leave as family. Thank you for joining our family today.